Memphis basketball under Penny Hardaway has been – there's a lot of adjectives you could use. It's been, a ton of talented players, some incredible defensive teams, some incredible offensive players, I'll say, and a lot of just frustration, a lot of just wasted talent, a lot of up and down chemistry. It's just been all over the place. Christian and Nick here with John Martin, who, with ESPN Radio in Memphis, Field of 68 does a lot of great things. John, so happy to have you here. I don't even know if I should start with the assistant coaches all leaving or Nick Georgian being the only guy back. Where are you at right now with this Memphis program?
Well, this is kind of it. This is the crescendo for Penny at Memphis. He's insulated himself, changed his entire staff. Most of that was support staff, I'll say. Those guys had already kind of been demoted or had their pays cut or whatever the case may be. But the theme at Memphis over the last 6 years has been just constant turnover, instability, whether that's players on the team, whether that's staff. Now, part of that is, he goes after big fish, assistants, right? Mike Miller, Larry Brown, Frank Haith, Sam Mitchell, the list goes on and on. Rasheed Wallace, like those guys were never going to be here for long. But one thing I can say that he's definitely lacked is just that sort of right-hand man, throughout it all on that bench, which a lot of great staffs have. And he still doesn't have it, I don't think. So, look, it's 2 straight years of flipping the roster as well. And fans here are, they're ready to sort of see what this is going to be. Are you able to get back to the NCAA tournament and stay there? Or are we just going to make excuses after every season when it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I like this Memphis program, honestly. I know I don't want to call it a circus because it's not a circus, but it is a soap opera, man. And that's the issue with Memphis throughout the years is like, I want to back Penny, but they're just so inconsistent. It's like they can't figure out if they want to be a good team or a bad team. Last year they started off the season, they looked insane. Like I was like, wow, this Memphis team's great. And then like a flip of the switch, man. They went from a tournament team to like, wow, like they're really not about to make the tournament, and they didn't. So, I guess my biggest thing is moving forward, like all these good coaches and programs, they just have consistency. You know what to expect from them, even when they lose. Like why they lost. Like how does Penny find consistency this season?
Well, I actually think Penny can be great. It just sort of it comes down to whether he is going to let himself be that. I would guess. From, an against the spread perspective, he is maybe one of the best, as a 5+ point underdog in America. Like that. I don't know that off the top of my head, but it just always feels like, when he's getting that amount of points, he gets his teams ready to play, whether it's against Houston or whoever. But to your point, they were 15-2 last year. We were talking about a top 4 seed for them. They beat Clemson, they beat the crap out of Virginia, got to the Battle for Atlantis title game, beat Arkansas, beat Michigan. Now those wins didn't end up aging that well, but you don't know in that moment, right? You don't know in that moment that Arkansas was a disaster, that Michigan was going to be a disaster. I don't know how many teams go from 15-2 in January, top 10 in the AP poll, to out of the tournament. By the end of it, I would imagine that list is very short, if not just one. So look, I think the deal for Penny is he's got to listen to people that are willing to challenge him. He's got to be willing to trust the people that he hires to do their jobs. And I think that's the big key, and that's what's been missing is that he hasn't been receptive to feedback if it doesn't align with his views on things. And I think the best coaches would tell you that they're always learning, right? They're always learning. They don't know everything. And I think that's been a struggle for Penny is that he just hasn't been receptive to that feedback over the years.
Chris, before you ask a question, isn't this – I was looking earlier and I was shocked. This is going to be the 7th season as Penny as a head coach of Memphis. It does not feel like that long ago.
I know.
Like that. I know. It's crazy, dude. Crazy.
It is. It is. And, I mean, if you break down season by season, I mean, that 21-22 team with Amani Bates and Jalen Duren, I mean, that team had Gonzaga on the ropes at the half in the second round, I mean, if they had handled business in the regular season, they're probably a 5, and we're talking about Penny having a Sweet 16 there just on probabilities. And then the Kendrick Davis team 2 years ago, I mean, it was a complete choke job. You play the 3 when you're up 1, you get blown by. Kendrick Davis turns it over, which he never turned it over that season, and then you win, you get Fairleigh Dickinson. And so you're going to another Sweet 16. So, when this is all said and done, and it may be done after this year, it may be, who knows? But I think the way we'll sort of look at Penny's tenure is, man, damn, it was really close to being much better than it actually turned out to be. I mean, we're talking about, 2 snap decisions here or there, and maybe we're looking at this differently, but that's college basketball, and that's the sandbox we play in.
I'm glad you brought that up. I remember watching that Gonzaga game, and I'm like, Memphis is going to mess around and win this game. Like I was pretty convinced they were looking like the better team. Like Gonzaga had to make some shots to stay there, and then the FIU thing obviously was there. But all that being said, he's won at least 21 games every single season. So as much dysfunction as there's been, as much frustration as there's been, as much being so close to getting over that edge, like he's still done a good job. And man, has he had a lot of good players. From Kendrick Davis to the bigs, DeAndre Williams, Jalen Duren. I look at this roster and it's obviously talented once again, but my gut reaction when I see this roster is I don't know if it's as talented to withstand as much of the nonsense, and just
right
to quickly just run through how I viewed last season. Like there were times where I'm like, oh my God, this team is defending at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
No one can guard David Jones. If Javon Quinterly is being unselfish and take care of the ball, he's creating for everybody. And then if dudes like Daquan Walton are hitting shots, and then like Jalen Young comes at the bench to go, I'm like, this team is awesome. Like I was loving them after that stretch of beating Clemson, Virginia, A&M. I was all over Memphis, and then we're losing to Rice, and everything's falling apart. And then there was that crazy UAB game where they were like down 20 and then won by 20. Yeah. Just insane. Missing that now too. Here's the roster. He brings in Tyrese Hunter, who Nick and I think is a really good fit for, this system. I think this is going to bring out his skills, right? And then like PJ Haggerty, Colby Rogers, guys that Penny whispered to in the handshake line, like come to Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Dane Dange is a guy that's always been productive when he's gotten a lot of run. Nick Jourdain was one of the guys who always seemed to be playing like his hardest and like team basketball last year. So a lot to like about, at least the starting lineup. Probably Moussa Cisse as the 5th guy. Let me frame the question like this. Is Tyrese Hunter a guy that can come in and like be a guard that gets this team to play winning basketball and gets guys to play well around him and can really not just be good and productive himself, but elevate others?
Yeah, I think so. I have a lot more confidence in him than Haggerty, for example. I've been trying to pump the brakes on Haggerty the whole time. And it's really simple, I mean, it's just a math equation. You did it at Iowa State and you did it at Texas, Big 12 power league, maybe the best league in basketball. I mean, it is for now. I mean, if you just go off tournament bursts last year, right? And then you're dealing with a guy like PJ Haggerty who put up numbers in the AAC, but that Tulsa team was an abomination. I mean, they lost to Little Rock. They played one Power 5 team. I'm using that term loosely. It was Oklahoma State, and he struggled. He was terrible in that game. And so I think, 21 points a game, leading scorer on a bad team. But like, how does that translate? When your non-conference includes UConn and Maui and road games in the ACC, and you got to go to Mississippi State. He didn't play that kind of schedule last year. He wasn't on that type of team. So I have concerns there. Tyrese has been there and done it. I feel very confident, with his experience. He'll come in and, he'll be able to do what he's asked. And then once that calendar turns to January and it's the AAC, I mean, he really should dominate. So I think that's more of a guy, you'll lean on in the early parts of the season just because that non-conference is so tough. But I don't really have any doubts about him. I'm pretty high on him and Dane. I think Dane's probably your starting 5, and then you'll bring Moose off the bench. That would be my guess, just because he's so limited offensively. But my question's about Memphis and why I think their ceiling is very debatable is because who is their best player? I mean, is it supposed to be PJ Haggerty? Because if that's what you're trying to sell me on, I don't really know how much I'm buying that right now.
Yeah, I think, let me say this. Moussa Cisse was the anchor to that 2021 team that was number 1 defense in the country.
Yep.
And I love the Dane Danger pickup. I think, his per 40 at Illinois was solid. I think at the AAC level, like, he should just dominate.
Yep.
You say you're probably going to bring Cisse off the bench, so I'm assuming that they won't be playing much together then.
I don't think so. I mean, I suppose you could go big. I mean, that'd be kind of interesting. With Dane and Moose out there, but I think the idea is to stagger them for now. And then, you have Jourdain out there at the 4. You have some interesting combinations. Tyreek Smith, they brought in from SMU. Yeah. They have, the one thing they don't have as much. They have, decent size. They don't have, I don't think, enough shooting. And so I think if you go big, it's just a lot of pressure, on basically Kobe Rogers at that point. Because they don't have anybody else that can do it. But I suppose in a particular setting, they could do it, but I don't think that's the way they plan to start.
Colby Rogers. I didn't watch a lot of Wichita last year. 16 a game, 16, 4 and 2, 41% from deep. Is he a guy where you think those numbers are a bit more telling than Haggerty's numbers?
Yeah, for sure. Because, that's what he's going to be asked to do. Right. Like he's just going to ask maybe not, the number itself, 16, but hey, buddy, you got one job. It's to fill it up. When you have one job and it's to, shoot 41% from 3 and you've already done that in the AAC, to me, that is more sustainable than, hey, you averaged 21 a game on a terrible team last year. Now we're going to ask you to come over and have that same role on a team that expects to go to the NCAA tournament. And PJ was a guy who didn't shoot the ball well from 3. You'll hear people blaming on the wrist. I sound like a PJ hater because, I've been sort of on this campaign the whole time in Memphis too. But, I just sort of struggle with the assumption that it's just going to come over and translate the same way. I mean, I think, it just can't. It almost never does in college basketball. How many times have we seen guys at a lower level be 22, 23, 24, and I'm talking lower levels, but they come up and it's like, who's a good example of this? Nick Timberlake. Nick Timberlake was at Towson, right? And he was like a dog. I remember watching Towson games. I'm like, yo, this kid might be one of the best players in college basketball. He goes to Kansas. He can't walk and chew gum. So, I'm not saying that the jump is that drastic from Tulsa to Memphis. Obviously, they play in the same league, so it can be. But the schedule in the non-conference will be. I mean, I know that for a fact. So, I just think, again, Colby is a guy that's going to come in and he knows his job and he's an experienced guy. He'll perform. I don't really have much doubt about that because the shooter's going to do. She's going to shoot. He's going to do what he does. PJ, I think is much more of a question mark.
Yeah, they got 4 transfers from the AAC. Do you like that they'll be like familiar with the AAC already come conference season?
Not really. I mean, I would much rather you get players from a better league. They're easily accessible, right? Because, Penny sees them up close and personal. That has been, Chris kind of mentioned it. Like Kendrick Davis, for example. Now he was a dog. He was a beast. So that made total sense. But Penny likes to go with things he knows. And so that's why you see more of the reliance on the AAC guys. I don't think they're bad players, right? Jourdain's not a bad player from Temple. Kobe Rogers is decent. PJ, we shall see. But I am more of the mind of let's go get the seventh man, who did play and was relevant, but maybe wasn't a starter. Like a Dane Danger is a perfect guy to me. Like he is the perfect transfer to me because you just know he's going to eat in the American. Like he was playing well. There were games where he was Illinois' best player last year. guys like that who, can come in and they're dropping down from a Power 5 level, but obviously the competition drops off as well. Those are the kind of guys I would rather target, as opposed to hoping that it sort of stays the same with different roles in the American. But I also understand it from the coaching perspective, because you've seen them do it against you. I don't think it's a bad thing, but if I had my choice, I would go more the route of Hunter and Dane Danger than just poaching from the AAC.
For sure. I have a question real quick, Chris. I heard this guy is a deep sleeper. I follow the scouting service, and he was hyping him up. What can you tell me about Danielle Vieira Tuck? And is he eligible? I thought he might have had some eligibility concerns.
Yeah, so I would have loved to be able to. He's not coming. He's not coming. Yeah, there were some eligibility concerns, and I think he's leaving it open for 2026. But I think he's pursuing some other route for 2024-25. So he won't be on campus this year.
Gotcha.
John, stylistic question. So last year there were moments when I thought, and maybe I was just backing Memphis and just being optimistic, but where I loved the way I was wait, I love the way Memphis is playing the free flow street ball. I think that there's a chemistry between David Jones and Javon Quinterly when they know whose turn it is, and there's a flow to it, and I'm liking it. Other times I'm you got Naquan Tomlin there too. No, yeah. It's the talent disparity is absurd, and why are we not defending? And why is it's all about me on offense? And I'm my question is, what there were some press bike moments where Penny's just we don't like each other. We gotta figure it out. If you had to describe, what leads to things going from we're working as a team, it's all great, to things start to get bitter, and then it just kind of spirals, and why the coaching staff isn't able to get that back on track when it does start to spiral.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of Penny's greatest flaws as a coach. He doesn't define the roles. He just doesn't do it, and I don't know if that's his NBA background, right, where he kind of wants the players to police themselves in a way. But in college, man, you got to intervene. You got to intervene, and you got to make sure that everybody knows, hey, this is our top scoring option. This is how our offense is going to run. It can't be equal opportunity, because that's how you end up with the team that has terrible chemistry. I mean, that was the big problem last year. They added Naquan Tomlin, and in Memphis, that's from where I sit, I'm yo, this should be a ladder move. This should elevate you maybe into a contender with a guy like that who's played in a Final Four or an Elite Eight, I should say. Instead, it just caused feelings of resentment. Why are you bringing in somebody else this late in the calendar? And again, I think the responsibility there again falls on Penny, that you have to sort of set those expectations before it even happens. And that did not happen. I mean, they lost it was so weird. They lost to South Florida. They blew this big lead, right? They were up 20 or whatever. And they were winning, and they had one loss, I think, prior to it. Then Penny comes to the press conference, and he's talking about how this has been bubbling, this has been brewing, and you're just where did this come from? When you got it felt good, it felt fine. It's one loss, okay, stuff happens, but clearly there was stuff underneath the surface. And that's also the risk you run, fellas, when you're flipping your roster over completely every year. Who's the leader? Who's the guy that I can turn to from a production standpoint that's been in this program, that knows the culture, that knows the expectations? They used to have DeAndre Williams for that. Well, he eventually ran out of eligibility, right? So I don't know who that guy is for Memphis this year. The constant is Penny, but again, when he kind of just wants to avoid the conflict and let the players police themselves, you're going to run into problems, throughout your season. And we saw that last season.
Is it not Jourdain? Jourdain is the one guy that stayed. And like I said, from a body language perspective, and just what I saw on the court, he seemed like a guy that was a very team first guy that could be a good culture piece
for sure. I mean, he's going to have to be. And of course, last year it was his first season, so he didn't have that cachet. But now, he could say this is my second year, and he's definitely the guy that doesn't care about scoring. He doesn't care about anything other than winning the games. He'll dive on the floor for a loose ball. He's limited. I mean, he's not like, you'll never call him one of the best players on the floor, but, he definitely gives effort every single night. And I think they're going to have to lean on him. Problem is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a sixth man type of guy? I just don't know. That's the stuff we have to find out.
What do we expect from look at the roster? Baraka Okaji, sophomore transfer from George Mason, and then 4-star top 100 freshman Jared Harris.
Yeah, I think Baraka, he has a shoulder right now, but it sounds like he's going to be ready in a month from now. They have an exhibition coming up in Memphis against North Carolina, and I think they're hoping to get him, out there for that at least. I think one of the great things about this team is that there's really only 7 to 8 guys that should expect to play. This is not going to be 9, 10, 11. You got Penny's sons. You got East High School kids. He coached in 2017. That's all gone, right? That's all out the window now. So Barak is a guy who I feel like, he defends. He was steady at George Mason. I actually weirdly feel better about him translating than PJ Haggerty. Now his role is going to be much smaller, and that's probably why. But I think, he's going to come in and give a good, 12 to 15 minutes a game, do what he's asked to do. And I would expect Jared probably not to play that much. I mean, freshmen just don't play in college basketball anymore. And in such a desperation year where Penny has to get to the tournament or else we're going to be having very difficult conversations in Memphis, he's probably not going to be turned into a freshman very often.
John, you mentioned the Suns. Like, a team that's struggling with chemistry, to have 2 of the coach's son has to add another layer to the dynamic of just, resentment breeding between players. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, I can't necessarily speak to the players, but it's just a math problem, right? I mean, Jaden Hardaway was getting X number of minutes. Ashton Hardaway was getting X number of minutes. And were they better than guys they were in front of? Probably not. But I'm a parent. I got 2 kids. With that being said, like, I got to win games too. Like, my job is to win games. It's not to, give my sons playing time. I don't think he was like egregious with it. Maybe earlier in his tenure he was. But again, like, that's been a criticism, whether it's his sons, whether it's, East High School kids he coached back in the day, this sort of what do they call it? Daddy ball. I mean, I hate that term, but that's what people call it. And it's just basically a willingness to, not play other players because you have, existing bias or loyalty, even if it's not justified. But all that's gone. And I think that's the hope now. I think a lot of coaches are better when they don't have decisions to make, right? They don't have different combinations. Like for Memphis, I think the best 6 are pretty obvious. And as long as you play the best 6, you're probably going to win, the majority of your games.
Where did Ashton transfer to?
St. Mary's.
Really?
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I thought he went to Vermont. Did he go to Vermont at first?
That was Jalen Young.
Oh, okay.
And then he left. So I don't know where he wound up now. But yeah, he was at Vermont for a minute, and then I think the NIL didn't hit.
He got the hell out of Vermont. I don't blame him. Yeah. And my last question is just a follow up. How's Caleb Mills doing?
Well, he's gone, unfortunately.
Right.
They were hoping to get him back on a waiver. I guess you throw the Hail Mary at the end to see if he's got one more year because he only played. I don't remember exactly how many games he played this year, but I think they were hoping to get the red shirt also for the year he missed at Houston when he only played 4 games. To hear them tell it, I mean, when he went down, it was like the whole season went with him. I mean, they really were gassing this dude up like he was, Damian Lillard or something. But they definitely did miss his. I think when we talk about leadership and what that team lacked by the end of it and sacrifice, they did miss that from him. And it's unfortunate that they can't run it back with him for one more year because I feel like he deserved a full year based on the 2 full years he missed, but NCAA didn't see it that way.
No, there's been way more egregious waivers given out, and
for sure.
Caleb he wasn't didn't jump off the page with his production at all last year, but I definitely think there has to be some type of correlation because the team did play better when he was in the fold, and he definitely took this is a guy Kelvin Sampson said was the best offensive player he ever recruited and was a preseason American Player of the Year, and it was kind of sad to see just injuries and just bad situations at Florida State not work out for him. I guess one last thing, John. I feel like a Penny Hardaway coach team can sit, even if he makes steps in some of his blind spots of role allocation, of just offensive flow, of roster construction. I still think a Memphis team, with the way he recruits, needs to be led by the performance in the defensive end. I think it needs to be a team that really defends at a high level. And I don't know. I know Tyrese Hunter. I know what he brings defensively. I know what Nick Jordan brings defensively. I know what Musa Cisse brings defensively. But Haggerty and Rogers, are they athletic enough? Are they, connected enough to be strong defenders on the perimeter? And then a guy like Dane Danger, I understand Illinois was kind of funky last year with what they were trying to do with Coleman Hawkins at the 5 and everything, which is why he didn't play as much. But, do you think that this personnel can be coached up to be an elite defense?
Yeah. I mean, Nick mentioned it already. When they had Musa in 2020, 2021, they were number 1 in the country in defensive efficiency. And I think, that's not necessarily because they're guards. It's just because when you have that, in the paint, it makes up for a lot of mistakes, and I think that's kind of the idea here. It's interesting. Torvik has Memphis in the preseason, and I love Torvik. He has Memphis in the preseason ranked better offensively than defensively. I think he's got this Memphis offense as a top 20 offense in America. Now, I don't know what assumptions he's making. I don't know if he's just saying, all right, here was their production last year. We're going to just completely extrapolate it and put it into Memphis, and this is what we get. But I think the way that Memphis is going to have to win is going to be defensively, because I just don't think they have enough scoring. I don't think they have enough shooting. And so I think they're going to have to really lock in defensively and tighten up, because that was whatever they were last year was embarrassing. I mean, it was routinely team scoring 80, 90, 100. I mean, it was just terrible. And they didn't have that sort of, central perimeter defender. They had no rim protection. This year they've addressed that. And so I think, Memphis is going to be better off and more suited, I think, to play games in the 60s and 70s than the alternative. So, yeah, I think with Musa and everything they plan to do there, I think they will be better defensively, and that'll be a good thing for the program.
Nick, any last things?
No.
John, thank you so much for joining us. One final thing that's in my brain. We mentioned that UConn's on the schedule.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that Penny's great as an underdog, which I've definitely noticed.
Yeah.
Too. My brain thinks that match is going 2 ways. Either they're going to be absolutely lost by UConn's motion, or they're going to punk UConn a bit because of their talent and because they are kind of playing a different style of teams they usually face, and they could definitely give them a scare. Which one do you think is more likely?
No, I think Memphis definitely is live in that one. I'm low on UConn this year. I think it's egregious that they're the preseason favorite to win the championship. I mean, are they a preseason top 10 team? Sure. I think I had them 7th, but I think Donovan Clingan hid so much for them defensively and offensively in some ways, and I just don't think you can lose what they've lost the last 2 years. I mean, I like some of their pieces, right? You bring back Caravan, but I just think you're kind of asking for a lot of jumps, from a lot of different players, and you're just not going to get that. You're not going to hit 100% there. So, are you going to be able to replace the shooting of Cam Spencer? Are you going to be able to replace everything Tristan Newton did for you? Are you going to be able to replace, the athleticism and explosion of Stephon Castle? You're going to be able to replace the rim protection and do everything of Donovan Clingan the last 2 years? Come on, bro. You're not going to be able to do that. So I think Memphis is live, just generally speaking, but I don't think you're going to get this big discount. I don't think you're going to get this big discount on Memphis when that game happens. You're not going to be getting 7.5.
Bro, I just looked at Torvik because you said you used Torvik.
Yeah.
Have you seen the number on that game?
Isn't it UConn -1? 3. Okay, yeah. So that's, again, you're not getting
76, 73. He has it.
Yeah, so, are you prepared to take Memphis plus 4.5, buddy? That's what you're going to have to do.
Well,
oh, boy.
Definitely have that one circled. That might be one of my most, anticipated games. But
that's
thanks
again.
again. Thanks
Yeah,
again for
it'd be
doing it,
fun.
Sean. Super fun. You've got the record for longest of these so far. I knew this was going to happen. So
We did it, boys.
man.
Thanks for having me.